Good evening, everybody. I am Dr. Raghav Bansal. I am working as electrophysiologist in UN Mehta Institute of Cardiology as assistant professor. And the topic of today's CCE is 12-lead ECG localization of idiopathic VT. So, in the next half an hour, we will understand the nitty-gritties of localization, ECG localization of idiopathic ventricular arrhythmias. So, what are idiopathic ventricular arrhythmias? They are basically ventricular arrhythmias which occur in structurally normal hearts. So, structurally normal heart, initially we used to think if echo is normal, the heart is structurally normal. In today's date, to call a heart structurally normal, it is good to have a cardiac MRI done, which rules out any other structural abnormalities which cannot be picked up on the echoes. And how do these arrhythmias present? They often present as frequent VPCs, or they can present as salvos of NSVT runs, or even sustained VT, which might be sometimes be associated with symptoms of presyncope and syncope, and rarely they are hemodynamically unstable. So this is the spectrum of clinical spectrum of these idiopathic ventricular arrhythmias, and if the patient is significantly symptomatic even on some drugs, then this becomes an indication for catheter ablation for these arrhythmias. Important to recognize that around 70 to 80% of these arrhythmias arise from the outflow tracts, which might be either the right ventricular outflow tract or the left ventricular outflow tract, and they can be effectively treated with catheter ablation if they are troublesome. So, surface 12-lead ECG, why it is important? Because it is useful in localizing the precise origin of the ventricular arrhythmia. So, it helps the electrophysiologist while ablating. So, we can map in that region to find the exact origin and ablate it. The other reason is, importance is that to localize, after localizing, the mechanism of the arrhythmia may be different from location to location, and some drug may be effective, more effective in some particular type of ventricular arrhythmia, and some other drug might be effective in another type of ventricular arrhythmia. For example, beta blockers will be more effective in papillary muscle VT, and calcium channel blockers would be more effective in a fascicular VT. So these localization tactics help us in clinical management as well as catheter ablation. So from what all structures idiopathic ventricular arrhythmias arise? So these can be outflow tracts, fascicular fascicles, the papillary muscles, the mitral and the tricuspid annuli, and the LV summit or the crux. So we can divide it into the right ventricular origin or the left ventricular origin. So the outflow tract region is the most common. It can be endocardial from the RVOT or the LVOT, or it can be supravalvular from the pulmonary artery, which is very rare, or the aortic route, which is fairly common in terms that it would constitute around 10% of the ventricular arrhythmias from the outflow tracts. And then they can be from the annulus, either the tricuspid annulus, the most common location will be parahesian, or the mitral annulus. The fascicle, if we see the fascicular VT, the left posterior fascicle is the most commonly involved fascicle, and around 90 to 95% of the cases, left posterior fascicle would be the site of origin for the fascicular VT, and left anterior fascicle is fairly uncommon. Then intracavitary structures can also cause these idiopathic VTs, which will include the papillary muscles, in which the posterior papillary muscles of the left ventricle is more common, and rarely right ventricular papillary muscles or moderator band can also give rise to these arrhythmias. Then there are infundibular muscles on the right side, including the parietal band and the septal band, which can cause these arrhythmias. And lastly, these arrhythmias can be epicardial in origin, in terms that they can arise from the LV summit, which we will be discussing about the anatomy of the LV summit later, and the crux of the heart, which is the inferior most structure near the middle cardiac vein. To understand the origin, ECG localization and origin, we first need to understand few anatomical considerations. So classically, what we have learnt in anatomy in the dissection hall, that the anatomical description of the heart is in the Valentine position, where the heart is held straight into the hand with the apex at the bottom and the right and the left atria above. We will see this in a figure in the next slide. And it is important to understand how the heart lies in the thoracic cavity in the patient. So that is the attitudinal description of the heart, and we need to understand that RV is anterior and to the right of the LV. It's not only to the right of LV, it is also anterior to the left ventricle, and LV is lying obliquely in the thoracic cavity with the apex inferior and anterior, and the base posterior and superior. And what we call as the anterior interventricular sulcus is actually superior, and what we call as the posterior interventricular sulcus is inferior. So this can be understood like when we have a inferior MI, we call it an inferior wall MI, because that is the wall which lies in contact with the diaphragm on the inferior part of the heart. However, the opposite wall, which is actually the superior wall, we call it an anterior MI rather than a superior MI. So this is a misnomer because it's not anterior, it's just because the classically anatomical description we hold the heart in such a manner that it appears to be anterior, however it is superior. So this is important to understand because the ECG vectors won't follow the Valentine position or the classical anatomical description, they will follow the attitudinal description. Another important thing to understand is that RVOT wraps around the LVOT and it is lying in very close proximity with the aortic root. This will we will further see in the images. And aortic wall forms the centerpiece of the heart as it is wedged between the mitral and the tricuspid annuli. So this is the classic Valentine position of the heart as we have learned in the anatomy, the apex at the bottom and the atria above, the ventricles below. If we see this picture, we think that the ventricles are inferior, the atria are superior, and left is left and right is right. Even in this picture, we can realize that the RVOT, the pulmonary artery, it wraps around the LVOT, which is arising from the LV, and the ascending aorta is actually to the right of the main pulmonary artery. This is a very important concept to understand, and a lot of discussion will be based on this concept. Now this is, and if we look at this right bottom, so this is this is a reconstructed computed tomographic image, and if we see at the right bottom, this is actually an elaeocranial view. So we are seeing the heart from the left and above. So we are seeing some part of the head end as mentioned by the H in that diagram, and the left and the anterior. So we have, if we see the elaeocranial view, then we are actually seeing the heart in the classical anatomical description. However, when we see just from the anterior, from the front, how the heart looks in the thoracic cavity, then we realize that the atria are actually posterior and the ventricles are actually anterior, the right ventricular being more anterior, the left ventricular and the left atria being more posterior as compared to the right sided structures. So right and left are not simply right and left, but they have some anterior posterior conformation also, plus the anterior wall, which we call the anterior wall, is actually the superior wall, and the what we call the posterior wall is actually the inferior wall. And the mitral annuli and the tricuspid annuli, if we see in the previous image, so it appears that they are rings which are lying in a horizontal plane, but that's not the truth. They are tilted along the axis, and there is a superior part of the annulus and the inferior part of the annulus. This is very important to understand. If we don't understand this, it would be very difficult to understand the ECG vectors for localization of idiopathic VT. And this is another anatomical dissection diagram where the heart has been shown to understand how the RVOT wraps around the LVOT. So on the leftmost figure, there is a left atrial appendage marked as LAA, and the pulmonary artery has been marked as the PA. So the PA is opened, dissected longitudinally, and if what we see is that the RVOT giving rise to the pulmonary artery lies very close, in close proximity towards the left atrial appendage. Thus, the RV is giving rise to RVOT, which is moving towards the left and anterior side of the body. And if we pull out the pulmonary artery anteriorly, then behind what we see is the aortic root and the origin of the left main. So the left main coronary artery and the aortic root, the coronary cusps, are just lying posterior to the RVOT and the pulmonary artery. They are in very close proximity. Again, this is another diagram which is again addressing the same thing. I am reiterating this again and again because this is a very important concept to understand. So the RVOT is lying very near to the aortic cusps, and if we see, the posterior RVOT is lying in very close proximity to the right coronary cusp of the aortic root. So much so that the arrhythmias arising from the posterior RVOT and the right coronary cusp appear very similar, and it is very difficult to differentiate them even on the ECG. Another important concept again which I want to reiterate is that the aortic valve is wedged between the mitral valve and the tricuspid valve, while the pulmonary valve lies in another plane because it is lifted up by the infundibulum of the RVOT. Then there is a structure, epicardial structure called the LV summit, which is lying even more anteriorly and towards the left. It is the superior most part of the epicardium of the left ventricle, and we will be discussing in more detail about it later. Now this is a cross section of the heart, and along with the ECG correlation, now V1 lead is an anterior lead. It's an anterior chest lead, so V1 is just in front of the RVOT. So anything at the site number 1, which is the anterior RVOT. So if the ventricular arrhythmia is arising from site number 1, the anterior RVOT, it is all the activation vector is away from V1. So there would be no R wave and it would be a QS in V1. However, as we go towards posterior, in the posterior RVOT, site 2, and the anterior aortic root, which is the right coronary cusp, site 3, we'll start having a small R wave because there would be some initial activation which is towards the lead V1, and majority of the activation is away from lead V1. So majority would be the negative S wave. As we move more posteriorly towards the left coronary cusp, then we get to site 4 where we get even more prominent R wave in the V1, and if we move even more posteriorly towards the mitral annulus, especially the posterior mitral annulus, we get a complete RBBP or a positive R wave in lead V1. This is very important to understand again because this anterior lead transition is one of the differentiating markers for recognizing the origin of idiopathic VTs on ECGs. Now, relevant ECG features for localization of these VTs. So first, most important feature is the QRS axis. We need to see that is the axis superior, first we have to check that it is superior or inferior by looking at the leads 2, 3 and AVF, and then we have to check that the axis is right or left. This can be done by looking at lead 1. So anything which is positive in 2, 3 AVF points inferiorly, it's an inferior axis. If it is negative in 2, 3 AVF, it points superiorly, it is superior axis. Vis-a-vis, if there is lead 1 positivity, then it is left axis, and if there is lead 1 negativity, it points towards right axis. Then we have to carefully look at the bundle branch block pattern. As a general rule, arrhythmias arising from the LBBB, arising from the left ventricle will give an RBBB pattern, the right bundle branch block pattern, and arrhythmias arising from the right ventricle will give an LBBB, a left bundle branch block pattern. Again, we have to look at the precordial transition as discussed in the previous slide because that gives an idea how posterior is the origin of the arrhythmia. And we have to look at the QRS width. Is it septal versus the free wall? A narrow QRS will be towards the septal, or a wide QRS would be towards the free wall. A very wide QRS will point towards an epicardial origin. And to look at is the arrhythmia arising near the base, which is towards the tricuspid and the mitral annulus, versus is the arrhythmia arising near the apex. We have to look at the lead V6. So lead V6 points towards the apex, it's an apical lead. So any arrhythmia which is arising towards the base will give us big positive deflection in V6 because the majority of the electrical activation is occurring towards lead V6. So we have to look at the RS ratio in lead V6. If it is RS is more than 1, it points towards a more basal origin, and as the RS ratio decreases to less than 1, then it would be a mid cavity structure or an apical structure. So again, coming to the QRS width, this is a basic tenet that narrower QRS complexes arise from the septal structures because they tend to engage the conduction system earlier and cause a narrower QRS. While very wide QRS, especially more than 180 millisecond, they point towards epicardial complexes. Epicardial can be further suggested by these further features, which include a pseudo delta wave more than 34 milliseconds, which is like a delta wave seen in WPW syndrome, or intrinsicoid deflection time more than 85 millisecond, which is nothing but from the measurement from the start of the QRS complex to the first peak of the QRS complex in the anterior precordial leads. Maximal deflection index, which is again intrinsicoid deflection time divided by the total QRS width. If the maximum deflection index is more than 0.55, this is a ratio. I'm sorry for that error, it's not in milliseconds. So MDI, if it is more than 0.55, it points towards an epicardial origin. And the shortest RS complex, just like Brugada criteria, if it is more than 120 milliseconds, it points towards an epicardial origin. And pattern break in V2, which means that V1 is positive and V3 to V6 is positive, and single out in V2, single lead is negative. That point towards an LV summit origin, which would be discussing later. The right-sided ECG, which is shown, it is a narrower QRS. If we see, the width is around 120 to 130 milliseconds, and this might be pointing towards a more outflow tract origin, which is septal. Another concept, this is again just a description of the MDI. So what we see on the left side of the figure, from the start of the QRS to the peak of the QRS is 112 millisecond, while the QRS width is 183 milliseconds, and the MDI is 0.61. So this points towards the epicardial origin, as well as if we look at the QRS complex carefully, it's the initial delta wave. If it is more than 34 milliseconds, that also points towards epicardial origin, as well as the total width, which is more than 180 milliseconds, it also points towards an epicardial origin. Further, if we look at the AVF and lead 1 leads, so especially this is especially true for the left ventricular myocardium, if the origin is endocardial, since LV has a significant width to its myocardium, significant depth to its myocardium, if the origin is endocardial, so in the inferior lead, if the origin is inferior endocardium, it will still give a small R wave in the lead AVF. However, if it is completely epicardial, like from the crux, it is likely to give a QS pattern in the lead AVF. Now coming to an algorithm which is very important. This is the simplest algorithm and very clinically useful. This was proposed by Enriquez et al. In Heart Rhythm 2019. This is an article which you should all read. So heart can be, this is a posterior view of the heart, that we are looking the heart from behind. So we can divide the heart into 4 quadrants, the superior quadrants, the inferior quadrants, and the left and the right quadrants. So these 4 quadrants we can identify structures and then we can localize. So how can we go about it? The right superior quadrant gives an inferior axis and positive in lead 1, which is inferior axis, and a left axis. So what are the structures in this quadrant? The posterior RVOT, the right coronary cusp, the superior tricuspid annulus, and the parahesian region near the tricuspid annulus. Then comes the inferior axis with a negative lead 1, which means that is the superior left quadrant. The structures in this quadrant are the anterior RVOT, the left coronary cusp, the LV summit, the aortomitral continuity, the superior mitral valve annulus, the anterior fascicle, and the anterior papillary muscle. Coming to the inferior quadrants, these will give rise to a superior axis. The more important differentiating between left and right is the bundle branch block pattern here. So on the right side, we have the inferior tricuspid annulus, the crux, and the moderator band. On the left side, the common structures are the papillary muscle, the posterior fascicle, and the inferior mitral annulus. Now we will go one by one. So what is the step 1 in this algorithm? You just have to look at the leads 2 and 3 and to determine if the axis is superior or inferior. If the axis is both positive in both, then it means that it is arising from the basal areas, including the outflow tracts and the superior AV valves. If the axis is negative in both, it means that it is arising from the inferior aspect of both the ventricles. If there is discordance between lead 2 and 3, we will discuss it separately. So coming to the step 2, so we have to see that if the structures are towards the right of the midline or towards the left of the midline. So outflow tract ventricular arrhythmias, we have to, so the superior segment arrhythmias, we have to look at lead 1. If the lead 1 is positive, which means that the structure is right sided, the axis is towards left. These structures we have again discussed, the posterior RVOT, the RCC, the parahesian region, and the superior tricuspid annulus. While if lead 1 is negative, the structure is left sided and it suggests the superior left sided quadrant structures. If the structure is midline, which is the RCC LCC commissure, we can have a biphasic or an equiphasic deflection in lead 1. For the inferior VA, we have to look at the bundle branch block pattern. The RV structure will give a left bundle branch block pattern and the LV structures will give to a right bundle branch block pattern. So this is the diagram which we need to keep in mind for the discussion we are going to have. Once we have gone into the segment from the quadrant from which the arrhythmias are arising by looking at the inferior and the superior axis and the right and the left of the midline structures, then we have to pinpoint the structure from which is arising by looking at the refined localization in that particular quadrant. So starting from the right superior quadrant, which has an inferior axis and positive lead 1. So what we look at is lead AVL. So mostly the structures in this quadrant are superior structures like RVOT and RCC. Important to understand is that AVL is not only a left-sided lead but also a superior lead. So these superior structures always give a negative AVL in the negative deflection in the lead AVL. So if the deflection is negative in the lead AVL, then it will point towards the superior structures, which includes the posterior RVOT, the right coronary cusp. However, if there is an R wave in the AVL, it suggests origin from a more inferior structure, which includes the tricuspid annulus or the parahesian region. So to differentiate between these further, we have to look at the transition. If the transition is late, which is more than V4, then it points towards the RVOT. If the transition is very early, yani it is before V2, then it is mostly arising from the right coronary cusp. Again, near the tricuspid annulus, if the transition is very late, it is arising from the tricuspid annulus, and if the transition is earlier, then it is mostly arising from the tricuspid septum or the parahesian region. So one thing you need to keep in mind, as we go from the free wall towards the septum, the transition becomes earlier. Same from anterior to posterior, the transition becomes earlier. This is the same diagram, understanding that if the transition is later than V4, it points towards an RVOT origin. If the transition is earlier than V2, it points towards an LVOT origin. But what happens when the transition in V3? We are in a gray zone. What we need to classify it further. So what we look at, V3 transition is the PVC transition occurring after the sinus rhythm transition. If it is happening that way, then it is mostly arising from the RVOT, and this is very specific for RVOT. In almost 100% of the cases, it would be RVOT. So in this example, what we see is the transition in sinus rhythm happens in lead V2. However, the transition in the PVC happens in lead V3. So transition is later than the sinus rhythm. In the example on the right side of the figure, the transition in the sinus rhythm is happening in lead V3. However, the transition in the PVC is already happening somewhere in between the V2 and V3, which points towards that the PVC is having a transition before sinus rhythm, so likely to be an LVOT origin. So if the transition is earlier than the sinus rhythm, then we should look at another parameter which is called as the V2 transition ratio. Now, how to calculate the V2 transition ratio? It is very easy. You just have to look at the R wave height in the PVC in the lead V2 divided by the whole height of the QRS complex in the lead V2 divided by similar calculation done in the sinus rhythm V2 lead, which means the R wave height in lead V2 divided by the whole QRS width in lead V2. So this ratio, if it is more than 0.6, again pointing towards an earlier transition, it points towards an LVOT origin. If it is less than 0.6, it points towards an RVOT origin. So that is how we can differentiate between posterior RVOT and RCC. However, this is not 100% accurate, and sometimes arrhythmias arising from this region need to be mapped on both the sides. Means they need to be mapped also in the RVOT region and also in the RCC region to be have a precise localization before going for ablation. Now this is the algorithm for differentiating the structure of origin in the left superior quadrant, which give an inferior axis, and since it is left quadrant, then they give a negative deflection in lead 1. So again we have to look at the transition. If the transition is later than V3, then it is most likely arising from the anterior RVOT. Again, it is an anterior structure, the RVOT, the transition would be later. And if the transition is earlier, as we move posteriorly, the transition becomes earlier and earlier. So immediately posterior to the anterior RVOT would be the LCC region, the left coronary cusp. Then the transition would be earlier, maybe in V2 and sometimes in V1 also. And as we go backward, which include the LV summit, the aortomitral continuity and the superior mitral valve annulus, all these will give a big R wave in lead V1 or an RSR dash or a QR pattern in lead V1. So how to further differentiate localization in LVOT? So looking at this figure, what we see is that non-coronary cusp is mostly has an atrial myocardial structure. It's mostly fibrotic structure, so it's very rarely arising ventricular arrhythmias from this structure. So most common would be from the RCC and the LCC. And if we see towards the left side of the figure, the LCC, so LCC will give us a big R wave in V1 and earlier transition with an M or W pattern in V1, and the aortomitral continuity give rise to a QR pattern in V1, which is very classically described for an AMC origin. NCC is mostly an atrial origin, and if we look at the RCC, so RCC will have a small R wave in lead V1 as compared to QS complex arising from the RVOT. This area is very difficult to differentiate from the posterior RVOT region as discussed previously. This is another diagram. If we see carefully, so on the top of the figure, it is arising from the RVOT, the posterior RVOT. V1 is QS complex, completely negative. If you see to the right side of the figure, as it is arising from the RCC, there is a small R wave in V1, V2, which would be the main differentiating between the RVOT and the RCC. If we look at the left side of the structure, then again it's a posterior RVOT but late transition. And if we look at the LCC origin, we get a significant R wave in lead V1 as compared to a very small R wave in the RCC. Now coming to the LV summit, LV summit is marked anatomically by the triangle of Brock and Mouchet. Is basically a region of the LV epicardium, which is the superior most part of the left ventricle. So it will give all positive waves in V1 to V6. It is the triangle's boundaries are marked by the left main, the left circumflex, and an imaginary arc between the LAD and the circumflex. This is the region. It can be divided into the region 1 and region 2 as marked on the figure. The region 1 is called the inaccessible area, which cannot be marked, which cannot be accessed for ablation through the coronary sinus, while the area marked 2 is accessible area which can be accessed from the coronary sinus, and this is divided by the anterior ventricular vein going in this LV epicardium. So how to identify LV summit VTs? So these are epicardial VTs. So these will have features of epicardial origin, including the maximum deflection index more than 0.55 and a wider QRS and an initial pseudo delta wave. Plus they have a significant positivity from V1 to V6. Plus there can be a V2 pattern break pattern where the V1 is positive, V2 suddenly has an RS pattern, and then again from V3 to V6 we have a completely R wave. It is not very essential to differentiate between the first and second area, but if we want to differentiate, the ratio of the S wave in AVL to AVR can help us in differentiating from the accessible to the inaccessible area. Coming to the inferior quadrants, this will give rise to superior axis and give a negative wave in lead 2 and 3. So if the arrhythmia is left bundle branch block pattern with a negative QS in V1, then we have to look at the transition. If the transition is later, like more than V4, then the arrhythmia is mostly arising from the tricuspid free wall or the moderator band, while an earlier origin point towards a septal origin, as we have seen in the superior segment also, that the lateral structures and the free wall structures have a later origin, a later transition, while a septal structures have an earlier transition. Or it might be arising from the crux, which is again epicardial near the junction of the middle cardiac vein and the coronary sinus. If the structure is arising from the left of the midline, then it is arising from the LV, then it will have a right bundle branch block pattern. Then we have to look at the RS ratio in lead V6. If it is more than 1, it points towards a more basal origin and point towards an arrhythmia which is arising from the mitral valve annulus, and it will give a big R wave in lead V1. However, if the RS ratio in the V6 lead is less than 1, it points towards a more mid cavity structure, which can be a posterior papillary muscle or a left posterior fascicle. Coming to the fascicular VT, this I am discussing in more detail because these are fairly commonly seen. So left posterior fascicular VT is the most common form, anterior fascicular VT is exceedingly rare, and the posterior fascicular VT has an exit at the inferior apical septum of the left ventricle, and it gives rise to a VT which has a right bundle branch pattern with a left superior axis and RS complexes in V5 and V6. This is a typical presentation of a fascicular VT with a typical RS-R dash pattern where the R dash is bigger than the small r, initial R in V1, and if we see there are prominent S waves in V5 and V6, plus it's a very fairly narrow QRS tachycardia, mostly less than 140 milliseconds, because it is arising near the septum, near the conduction system, and it engages the conduction system very early. So it's a narrow QRS tachycardia, and the axis is mostly superior and towards left with AVL and AVR positive. Lead 1 is frequently negative, 2-3 wave will be negative. So this is the posterior fascicular VT. The circuit in the posterior fascicular, it's a reentrant arrhythmia in contrast to other idiopathic arrhythmias which are more triggered activity or caused by automaticity. This one is reentrant, and this one is the reentry is caused by a slow diastolic pathway which exists in parallel to the posterior fascicle. So sometimes these arrhythmias will be very difficult to differentiate from an SVT with aberrancy, where aberrancy is giving rise to a right bundle branch block pattern with left axis. So how can we differentiate between the posterior fascicular VT and SVT with aberrancy? So we have to first look at discernible P waves. If there is AV dissociation and V is more than A, it points straightforward point towards the VT. If A is more than V, it points toward an SVT with aberrancy. It might be an atrial tachycardia. If the VA-AV ratio is 1:1, then we should look at the QRS axis and V6 RS ratio in the lead V6. So if the QRS is less than minus 100, extreme left axis, lead 1 is also negative, then it mostly points towards the posterior fascicle VT. Also, if the RS ratio in V6 is less than 0.15, that means which we have a very deep S wave in V6, it points towards the fascicular VT. If none of these features are there, then we have to look at these 4 features. If the bundle branch block pattern in V1 is atypical, it points towards the VT. If the QRS width is less than 140, it points towards the VT. So you need to remember this. This is one of the examples where a narrower QRS points towards the VT and a broader QRS points towards an SVT with aberrancy. And again, AVR positive points towards a VT, and RS ratio again a less than 1 ratio points towards the VT. If 3 or 4 features of these 4 features are positive, then they point towards VT. If only 1 or 2 features are there, it points towards SVT with aberrancy. And differentiating papillary muscle VT from fascicular VT. So papillary muscle VT are more commonly automatic in origin. So they behave clinically in an automatic fashion with a warm up and cool down period. They are wider because they engage the conduction system later. And the RBBB pattern in papillary muscle VT is often atypical with an R dash pattern in V1 or a QR pattern in V1. Also, if we see, because of the early engagement of the conduction system in fascicular VT, we can have a Q wave in 1 AVL in fascicular VT, which is absent in papillary muscle VT. So this is an example. On the left side, we can see left posterior fascicular VT, where we have a typical RBBB pattern in lead V1, RSR dash pattern, and the R dash is bigger than R, plus we have a small Q in 1 AVL. While on the right side, we see a papillary muscle VT, either it is a monophasic R as on the right side, and or it may be an R dash pattern where R and R dash are almost equal, and there is no Q wave in 1 AVL in papillary muscle VT. Plus the papillary muscle VT is slightly broader than the fascicular VT. Lastly, if we have a discordant 2-3 correlation where the lead one of the lead is positive and negative, so we cannot easily classify in the superior and the inferior quadrants. That means we are somewhere in the middle. So if we have a positive 2 and negative 3, it means that the structure is right sided, because it is lead 2 is pointing towards the left and lead 3 is pointing towards the right. So positive 2 and negative 3 is a mid cavity structure, mid structure, which is pointing towards the left and arising from the right. It can be parahesian, which is typically shows a narrower QRS and QS in V1 and a transition in V2 to V3, or it can be arising from the moderator band, which has a very late transition in V5, V6, or lateral tricuspid valve, which will give a very broad QRS and small r capital S pattern in V1 with a late transition. If it is negative in lead 2 and positive in lead 3, it means a mid structure which is arising from the left side. It can be either be a lateral mitral valve annulus, which will again give rise to a big R wave in V6 with a RS ratio of more than 1, as well as since it is arising from the lateral mitral annulus, it will be a fairly broad tachyarrhythmia, a broad VPC, and RBB pattern with a significant R wave in V1. Or it can be, sometimes rarely it can be an anterior papillary muscle, which will again have a similar to mitral annulus. The difference being, since it is a mid cavity structure, it will have a deeper S wave in V6 and RS ratio in V6 less than 1. So just summarizing the approach to idiopathic VT, the step 1 is the superior inferior axis. We have to look at the inferior leads and decide is the axis superior or inferior, and the quadrant of origin is superior or inferior. Then we look at the quadrant of origin, is it on the right side or on the left side of the midline. For the superior quadrant, it is better to look at lead 1, which helps in differentiating between right and left of midline. For the inferior quadrants, we look at the bundle branch block pattern. Once we have gone to a quadrant, then we have to use specific features to confine the origin to a likely site in the one of the 4 quadrants. So this step 3 is usually done by looking at the precordial transition in the right superior quadrant, the QRS width, which differentiates septal from the lateral wall structures, also from the epicardial structures, and looking at special QRS morphology features like AVL positivity in right superior quadrant point towards parahesian pathway, parahesian origin, and we have to look in transition in the left superior quadrant, as well as the RS ratio in the inferior quadrants to differentiate from the basal and the mid cavity structures of origin. So just to give two examples, so this is one of the examples of a ventricular arrhythmia VPC, which is arising from a structurally normal heart. So what we look at it, first we have to localize the quadrant. So first we look at the axis, superior or inferior axis. So lead 2, 3 AVF are negative, so it's in superior axis, so it's arising from the inferior quadrant. So then next we have to localize that is it arising from the right side or the left side of the midline. So in the inferior quadrants we have to look at the bundle branch block pattern. So here there is a QS complex in V1, so it's a left bundle branch block pattern, so it is arising from the right side. Now specific features in this quadrant are the inferior tricuspid annulus, the crux and the moderator band. So a QS pattern in V1, a slightly narrower QRS plus a late transition in V5, V6 all point towards a moderator band origin. So this is another example. Here 2, 3 AVF are positive. So a superior quadrant and inferior axis. If we have to look at the right or left of midline, then lead 1 is positive. So it is from the right of midline. So the right superior quadrant. Now look to further localize the structure, we have to look at AVL. So AVL is positive here, which point towards that it's a more inferior structure, which is the tricuspid annulus or towards the parahesian region. But if we look at the transition is early in V2 plus it's a narrow QRS. So this point towards the parahesian origin of this VPC. So in the end, just to end my talk, I need to emphasize this, that there are several limitations to ECG localization, and ECG localization cannot be 100% accurate each time. So when we are going to the catheter in the EP laboratory for catheter ablation, it just gives a area where we need to map, but it cannot frequently localize the exact site of origin, and it is the mapping in the EP lab which will give us the exact site of origin. So what are the limitations? So in it, ECGs are often not able to correct for cardiac rotations. So the cardiac anatomy, the cardiac position in the thoracic cavity is not very constant. There might be some rotations anti-clockwise, clockwise. These rotations in the thoracic cavity, like a patient with COPD will have a hyperinflated lung and a more vertical heart. So these rotations can change the patterns of ventricular arrhythmias on ECG. Lead positioning. It is very important to accurately position the chest leads and all the limb leads. There should be no errors in lead positioning. Positioning the chest leads one space higher, one intercostal space lower may cause significant changes in the 12 lead ECG findings. So we have to be very careful about that. Then there are some aortic deformities like aortic dilatation or unfolding of the root of aorta. These might also cause differences in ECG localization, which will make them less accurate. Further, chest wall deformities and thickness may cause obscuring of small R waves or small S waves in the ECG, or very thin chested patients may have a very large R waves here and there, so that may interfere with ECG localization. Similarly, left ventricular hypertrophy may change the conduction patterns in the myocardium and may cause changes in ECG localization, and there may be sometimes preferential conduction over some pathways. So since RCC and posterior RVOT are structures in very close proximity, VPC which is arising from the RCC can have a preferential conduction towards the posterior RVOT myocardium and exit from there. So on ECG it appears to posterior RVOT, but finally it is ablated from the RCC. So these things can happen, and these are the limitations of the ECG localization. Just to end my talk, I would like to reiterate that ECG machines interpretation should not be trusted too much, as these machines, they don't have any brain of their own, and we should always try to interpret ECGs on our own. Thank you.